Hello and welcome to Sherlock Holmes Story Generator, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today we dive into a chilling Victorian mystery. Sherlock Holmes and the Unsolved Crime of Death. Settle in with your favorite brew as Dr. Watson guides us through fog-shrouded London. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Visitor. It was a dreary autumn evening in the year 1895 when the fog of London hung over Baker Street like a heavy shroud, its tendrils weaving through the gas-lit thoroughfares and stifling the familiar clamor of the city. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint scent of coal smoke and wet cobblestones, and as I, Dr. John Watson, made my way back to our lodgings at 221B, my overcoat clung uncomfortably to my shoulders, sodden from the mist. I had spent the day tending to patients at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where the usual ailments of the season, coughs, fevers, and the occasional broken bone from a slippery pavement, had kept me occupied. Yet my thoughts, as ever, drifted to my singular friend Sherlock Holmes, whose restless intellect often demanded adventures far grander than my medical rounds could provide. Upon entering our sitting room, I found Holmes precisely where I expected, pacing before the fireplace, his lean silhouette casting angular shadows on the wallpaper. His violin lay neglected upon the table, a sure sign that his mind was starved for stimulation. The room was a study in controlled chaos, newspapers strewn across the sofa, a chemical apparatus bubbling gently on a sideboard, and a faint haze of tobacco smoke lingering from his earlier indulgences. Holmes's eyes, sharp and piercing as ever, flicked toward me as I hung my coat. "Watson," said he without preamble, "the world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. Mark my words, adventure is afoot this very night." I chuckled, accustomed to his cryptic pronouncements. "You say that, Holmes, yet here we sit with nothing but the fog for company." I settled into my armchair, warming my hands by the fire, and took up my pipe, its familiar weight a comfort after the day's labors. "Unless you've deduced a mystery from the pattern of the coals, I suspect we're in for a quiet evening." Holmes's lips twitched in what might have been a smile, but before he could retort, a sharp rap at the door interrupted us. Mrs. Hudson, our steadfast landlady, appeared, her expression one of mild exasperation tempered by fondness. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, stepping aside to admit our visitor. "She's in quite a state, if I may say so." Into our sanctum stepped a woman of refined bearing, though her appearance bore the marks of distress. She was clad in mourning black, her gown of fine silk rustling softly as she moved, and a veil of delicate crepe obscured her features, lending her an air of ghostly mystery. Her gloved hands clutched a small reticule, the fingers trembling slightly, and as she lifted her veil I saw a face pale as alabaster, with eyes red-rimmed from recent tears. Yet there was a dignity in her posture, a strength beneath the grief that commanded attention. She was Lady Eleanor Montague, widow of the late Sir Reginald Montague, a prominent banker whose sudden demise had sent ripples through London's high society. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she began, her voice low and tremulous, yet carrying the cultured tones of the aristocracy. "I come to you in my hour of greatest need. They say my husband died of natural causes, a failure of the heart," the coroner declared. "But I know in my soul that it was murder. I implore you to uncover the truth, for I cannot rest until justice is done." Holmes leaned forward in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes alight with that peculiar intensity that signaled a case had seized his interest. "Pray, madam, be seated and spare no detail," he said, gesturing to the sofa. "The devil, as they say, is in the particulars." Lady Montague sank onto the cushions, her reticule clasped tightly as if it were an anchor. "Sir Reginald was found 3 days ago in his study at our Belgravia home. she recounted. The door was locked from the inside, the key still in the lock and the windows bolted fast. There was no sign of intrusion, no mark of violence upon him. He was seated at his desk, slumped forward as if in mid-thought, a letter half written before him. The physician who examined him found no trace of poison, no wound, nothing but a heart that had simply ceased to beat. Yet, Mr. Holmes, I cannot accept this verdict. On the eve of his death, Reginald confided in me of threats. Shadowy figures from his past, men he feared had returned to haunt him. He spoke of debts unpaid, of secrets buried in his youth. I know not what they were, but I saw the fear in his eyes, a fear I had never known in him before. I glanced at Holmes, expecting to see skepticism, for sudden deaths among men of Sir Reginald's age and station were not uncommon. But his expression was one of keen absorption, his gaze fixed on our visitor with an almost predatory focus. "Describe these threats, Lady Montague," he urged. "Every word, every gesture he made." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her reticule. He was reticent, as was his way with matters of business, but he mentioned a name, the Serpent, and spoke of a debt from his time in India decades ago. He served there as a young man, you see, before his banking career. He said no more, but that night he locked himself in his study as if to guard against an unseen enemy. The next morning, he was dead. As she spoke, I noted subtle details that piqued my curiosity, though I lacked Holmes's knack for their immediate significance. A faint, exotic scent clung to her handkerchief. Jasmine, perhaps, or something rarer like sandalwood laced with an unfamiliar spice. Upon her lapel gleamed a curious brooch fashioned in the shape of a coiled serpent, its eyes tiny emeralds that caught the firelight. These seemed trivial, yet I had learned to trust that nothing escaped Holmes's notice. "Tell me of the study," Holmes continued, his voice calm but insistent. "The position of the body, the state of the room, every detail you recall." Lady Montague's brow furrowed as she summoned the memory. The room was as he left it, papers scattered on the desk, an inkwell overturned as if he had been startled in his writing. A glass of brandy stood untouched beside the lamp. The fire had burned low, and there was a faint smudge on the blotting paper as if from a seal or ring. The servants, our butler, Mr. Grayson, and the maid, Eliza, found him when they broke down the door. They saw nothing amiss, no stranger lurking about the house. The police, too, found no evidence of foul play. Yet I cannot shake the conviction that someone entered that room and took his life. Holmes rose abruptly, his movements fluid and purposeful, and crossed to the window, peering into the fog as if it held answers. "A locked room, a death without trace, and whispers of a past in the east," he mused aloud. "This is no ordinary case, Watson. Lady Montague, you have done well to come to me. I shall take up your cause. Tomorrow we shall visit the scene and see what truths the room itself may yield." Lady Montague's shoulders sagged with relief, though her eyes remained shadowed with fear. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard of your methods, and I place my trust in you. But please be swift, for I fear the shadow that took my husband may yet linger." As she departed, her veil lowered once more. The room seemed to grow colder. The fire's warmth no match for the chill of her tale. I turned to Holmes, who had resumed his pacing, his mind already dissecting the fragments of the mystery. "What do you make of it, Holmes?" I asked. "A heart attack, as the coroner claims, or something more sinister?" He paused, his gaze distant. "The heart may fail, Watson, but not without cause. A locked room is no barrier to a determined mind, and a past in India suggests motives deeper than mere robbery or spite. That scent on her handkerchief. Did you mark it? Not jasmine, but nard, a rare oil from the Himalayas, and the serpent brooch, a symbol perhaps of a society or sect. We are on the cusp of something extraordinary." I nodded, though my medical mind clung to simpler explanations. Could it not be grief distorting her perception? Men of Sir Reginald's age often succumb suddenly. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that familiar fire. Possible, but improbable. The smudge on the blotting paper, the overturned inkwell, the mention of the serpent. These are not the trappings of coincidence. Tomorrow, Watson, we shall uncover the first threads of this web. For now, rest. The game is afoot. As I retired to my room, the fog pressed against the windows, and the distant clatter of a cab faded into silence. I felt the stirrings of adventure tempered by an unease I could not name. Little did I know what shadows awaited us in the days to come. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Enigma. The morning following Lady Montague's visit dawned as bleak as the night before, with London's fog clinging to the streets like a jealous lover, muffling the clatter of hansom cabs and the cries of street vendors. I, Dr. John Watson, joined Sherlock Holmes in a cab bound for the Montague residence in Belgravia, my mind still turning over the widow's tale of murder in a locked room. Holmes sat beside me, his sharp profile etched against the misty window, his silence a testament to the machinery of his mind already at work. "Watson," he remarked as we rattled over the cobblestones, "a locked room is but a stage for a clever conjurer. The trick is to spot the sleight of hand." We arrived at the Montague mansion, a stately edifice of Portland stone, its windows dark and uninviting. The butler, Mr. Grayson, a man of middle years with a stoic demeanor and eyes that seemed to guard secrets, admitted us. He led us through a marble hall scented with beeswax and lavender to the study where Sir Reginald had met his end. The room was as Lady Montague had described, a fortress of oak and leather with a grand desk dominating the center, flanked by bookshelves groaning under the weight of ledgers and tomes. The windows were bolted, their heavy drapes undisturbed, and the door's lock gleamed, the key still in place as if mocking our purpose. A chalk outline on the floor marked where the banker's body had lain, slumped over his desk in death's quiet embrace. Holmes moved with the precision of a bloodhound, his magnifying glass glinting in the dim light of a gas lamp. "Observe, Watson," he said, crouching by the desk. "The inkwell, overturned, yet the spill is confined. A controlled chaos, suggesting interruption rather than accident." His lens hovered over a sheet of blotting paper where a faint smudge caught his eye. Not ink, but wax, crimson with a trace of grit. And here, he pointed to a barely perceptible scratch on the polished floorboards. "A mark too deliberate for a careless foot." I scribbled notes, my medical training urging me to seek rational causes. Could the wax be from a candle, Holmes? And the scratch from furniture moved? He shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Candle wax is softer, Watson, and this room lacks the telltale drippings. This is sealing wax, used for a purpose yet unclear. As for the scratch, it aligns with the desk's edge, too precise for accident." He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The brandy glass, untouched. The fire burned low but not extinguished. "And this letter?" He lifted a half-finished sheet, its script elegant but abruptly halted. Cut off, mid-sentence, as if death came swiftly. We turned to the household for answers. Grayson, the butler, stood rigid, his answers clipped and evasive when pressed about Sir Reginald's habits. "He worked late, sir, often alone. No visitors that night, none I saw." The maid, Eliza, a nervous girl with darting eyes, fidgeted as she recounted finding the body. "I screamed, sir, when I saw him, dead like a statue, his eyes open." Young Lord Arthur Montague, the deceased's son, joined us, his handsome face marred by a petulant frown. He claimed to have been at his club in St. James's until dawn, a story corroborated by a friend but delivered with a rehearsed air that piqued Holmes's interest. A red herring emerged in the form of a missing ledger, rumored to contain debts that might suggest suicide. Sir Reginald was troubled, Grayson admitted reluctantly, but he never spoke of ending his life. Holmes dismissed this with a wave. Suicide leaves traces of despair, Watson. Letters, farewells, a disordered mind. This scene speaks of calculation, of murder dressed as nature's hand. As we examined the desk, Holmes's fingers traced the smudge of crimson wax. This residue, he murmured, bears a faint scent, nard, the same as Lady Montague's handkerchief. A connection, perhaps, to her serpent brooch. I frowned, recalling the exotic perfume. A coincidence, surely, but Holmes's eyes gleamed. Coincidence is the refuge of the unimaginative. This wax, this scratch, the locked room, they form a chain, Watson, and we shall follow it. We departed the mansion as the fog thickened, swallowing the house in a gray veil. I felt a chill, not from the damp but from the sense of unseen eyes watching our retreat. Holmes, undeterred, hummed softly, his mind already unraveling the threads of the enigma. The serpent, the wax, the locked room, he mused as our cab rolled back to Baker Street. We are dealing with a mind as meticulous as my own. But every lock has a key, Watson, and we shall find it. Chapter 3, Shadows in the Fog. The fog of London, that ever-present spectre of autumn, had thickened by the evening following our visit to the Montague mansion, cloaking the city in a veil so dense that even the gas lamps struggled to pierce it. I, Dr. John Watson, trudged alongside Sherlock Holmes through the labyrinthine alleys of Whitechapel, my boots slipping on the slick cobbles as we pursued a lead gleaned from the butler Grayson's guarded words. He had let slip a name, the Serpent, a notorious fence in London's underworld, rumored to hold sway over secrets as dark as the alleys he frequented. Holmes, his keen eyes glinting beneath the brim of his deerstalker, had seized upon this thread with the fervor of a hound on the scent. If Sir Reginald's death is tied to his past, he had said as we left Baker Street, the underworld is where its shadow lingers. The streets of Whitechapel were alive with the rough music of survival. Hawkers shouting their wares, the clink of coins changing hands, the occasional burst of laughter from a public house. The fog coiled like a living thing, swallowing the shapes of passers-by and lending an air of menace to every shadow. Holmes, his Inverness cape billowing, moved with purpose, his gaze darting to every detail. The flicker of a match in a doorway, the glint of a knife in a costermonger's stall. I kept pace, my service revolver a reassuring weight in my pocket, though I prayed it would not be needed. Our quarry was a cloaked figure Grayson had described meeting Sir Reginald weeks before his death, a man whose furtive movements we had spotted near the docks. We trailed him through a maze of alleys, dodging fish carts and sidestepping puddles that reeked of refuse. The man moved swiftly, his hood drawn low as if sensing pursuit. "He knows we're here, Holmes," I whispered, my breath clouding in the chill air. "Precisely, Watson," Holmes replied, his voice low and steady. "Which means he has something to hide." With a sudden burst of speed, he closed the distance, and we cornered the man outside a dimly lit tavern, its sign creaking in the damp breeze. The scent of stale ale and cigar smoke poured from the open door as we followed him inside. The tavern was a den of flickering lanterns and rough-hewn faces, the air thick with the haze of tobacco and the murmur of illicit deals. Our man slipped into a corner booth where he exchanged hushed words with a companion whose face remained obscured. Holmes, ever the master of observation, leaned close to me, his voice barely audible. "Mark the glove on the table, Watson, embroidered with a serpent, the same motif as Lady Montague's brooch." I squinted through the gloom, catching the glint of green thread in the shape of a coiled snake. Before I could respond, the man glanced our way, his eyes narrowing beneath his hood. With a curse, he bolted, upsetting a table and sending glasses crashing to the floor. Holmes sprang after him, and I followed, my heart pounding as we plunged back into the fog. The chase was brief but chaotic, weaving through a throng of street vendors and narrowly avoiding a coal cart. In a narrow alley, the man stumbled, and a glove fell from his grasp, its serpent embroidery unmistakable in the dim light of a gas lamp. Holmes snatched it up, his fingers tracing the stitching. "A match, Watson," he said, his voice tinged with triumph. "This connects our shadowy friend to the Montague household. But why the serpent? A family crest, a secret society, or something more sinister?" He tucked the glove into his pocket, his mind already racing ahead. We returned to the tavern where the companion had vanished, but Holmes's keen ears caught a whispered phrase from a nearby table. "The Crimson Debt." It was spoken with a reverence that chilled me, as if it were a code for something far greater than money. "Sir Reginald owed more than pounds sterling," Holmes murmured as we stepped back into the fog. "This debt reaches back to his days in India, I wager." As we made our way back to Baker Street, the fog seemed to close in, the clatter of cabs and cries of newsboys fading into an eerie silence. I could not shake the sense that we were being watched, though no figure emerged from the mist. "Holmes," I ventured, "this serpent, could he be the killer?" Holmes's eyes gleamed in the gaslight. "A pawn, perhaps, but not the mastermind. The locked room, the crimson wax, the scent of nard, these point to a design too intricate for a mere fence. We are peeling back layers, Watson, and each reveals a deeper game." He paused, his gaze distant. "The serpent is a symbol, and symbols are the language of secrets. We must learn to read it." Back at 221B, as I warmed my hands by the fire, I reflected on the evening's pursuit. The glove, the whispered debt, the elusive figure, all were pieces of a puzzle that Holmes alone seemed poised to solve. Yet the fog of London, like the mystery itself, obscured the truth, and I felt a growing unease that we were only beginning to glimpse the danger ahead. Chapter 4. The Hidden Correspondence. The fog that had pursued us through Whitechapel's alleys lingered into the night, cloaking Baker Street in a damp, oppressive shroud that seemed to mirror the mystery we sought to unravel. I, Dr. John Watson, sat in our rooms at 221B, the familiar comfort of the fire doing little to dispel the chill left by our chase after the shadowy figure and the discovery of the serpent-embroidered glove. Sherlock Holmes, however, was in his element, his lean frame bent over the table where the half-finished letter from Sir Reginald Montague's desk lay under scrutiny. The glove, now resting beside a chemical vial, seemed to taunt us with its silent secrets. "The serpent motif, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice low and intense, "is no mere coincidence. It binds the Montague household to the underworld and to a past that refuses to stay buried." I poured tea, the steam rising in delicate curls, and ventured a question. Could the glove belong to the serpent himself? A calling card, perhaps? My medical mind, trained to seek clear causes, struggled with the web of symbols and whispers we had encountered. Holmes's eyes flicked up, sharp and gleaming. "A calling card implies bravado, Watson. This glove was dropped in haste, not left as a boast. No, our quarry is cautious, and the serpent is a sign of something larger, a society, a vendetta, or both." He returned to the letter, his magnifying glass tracing the elegant script that had halted mid-sentence. "This, however, may hold the key. Observe the ink, black but with an odd sheen under the light." He applied a chemical solution from his apparatus, a faint acrid scent filling the air. As the liquid touched the paper, ghostly words emerged, invisible to the naked eye. "Beware the eternal sleep from the east." I started, my tea forgotten. Invisible ink. But what does it mean, Holmes? A threat? A warning? Not opium, as you might suppose, he replied, anticipating my medical instincts. Nor a common poison like arsenic. This speaks of something rarer, a toxin from the Orient, perhaps curare or a derivative capable of killing without trace. Sir Reginald knew his danger, Watson, and hid his fears in this cipher. He set the letter down, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. The question is, who delivered the fatal dose, and how, in a locked room? Our next inquiry turned to a stack of correspondence Holmes had secured from the Montague study. Letters exchanged with a business rival, Mr. Elias Thorne, an importer of exotic goods whose fortunes had waned as Sir Reginald's star rose. The letters, sealed with crimson wax, bore the same faint scent of nard I had noted on Lady Montague's handkerchief. Thorne, Holmes mused, a man with motive, jealousy perhaps, or a grudge from their shared ventures in India. Yet his alibi for the night of the murder is ironclad, vouched for by half a dozen merchants at a trade dinner. I frowned, leafing through the letters. Then why the secret message? And this nard scent? It's too specific to be chance. Precisely, Holmes said, his voice tinged with excitement. The nard links the letters to Lady Montague, but the wax suggests another hand. Observe the seal's impression. A faint irregularity as if pressed by a ring rather than a stamp. He produced a small lens and examined the wax closely. The same crimson residue we found on the blotting paper. Thorne may be a red herring, Watson, but his secretary, a Mr. Carver, was notably nervous when questioned. A man with access to his master's seals and secrets. We summoned Carver to Baker Street, a wiry fellow with a sallow complexion and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. Under Holmes's relentless questioning, he admitted to handling Thorne's correspondence but denied knowledge of invisible ink or toxins. Yet his fingers trembled, and a bead of sweat betrayed him when Holmes mentioned the serpent motif. "I know nothing of snakes, sir," Carver protested too quickly. Holmes dismissed him with a wave, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. A weak link, Watson. He knows more than he admits, but he is not our killer. Merely a pawn in a larger game. As Carver departed, the fog outside seemed to thicken, pressing against the windows like a living thing. I felt the weight of the mystery settle over me. The pieces, serpent glove, crimson wax, hidden message, forming a pattern I could not yet grasp. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind weaving connections with the precision of a loom. "The eternal sleep from the east," he repeated, pacing before the fire. A paralytic, perhaps, administered in a way that left no mark. The locked room is no mystery if the method was ingenious. We must look beyond the obvious, Watson. To the chimney, the vents, the very air Sir Reginald breathed. I shook my head, my practical nature resisting such flights of fancy. A poison in the air? Surely that would have affected others in the house? Holmes smiled, a rare glint of humor in his eyes. Not if it was delivered with precision. Tomorrow we return to the mansion. The study holds more secrets, and I intend to find them. As he spoke, the fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, and I could not shake the sense that the serpent, whatever it represented, was watching us still. Chapter 5. A Night at the Opera. The fog of London, ever relentless, parted briefly as evening descended, granting a rare glimpse of starlight above the city's gas-lit grandeur. I, Dr. John Watson, found myself in the unaccustomed finery of a tailcoat, accompanying Sherlock Holmes to the Royal Opera House, where London's elite gathered like moths to a flame. Our purpose was not the strains of Verdi's Rigoletto, but the pursuit of answers in the death of Sir Reginald Montague. Holmes, suspecting that the young Lord Arthur Montague's connections might reveal the hand behind the serpent motif, had secured us seats in a box overlooking the glittering throng. "Society, Watson," he had said as we donned our evening attire at 221B, "is a masquerade of motives. Tonight we unmask a player in this deadly game." The opera house was a spectacle of opulence, its air heavy with the mingled scents of perfume, cigar smoke, and polished wood. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light on silks and satins, and the swell of the orchestra filled the hall with a passion that seemed to mock the cold mystery we pursued. Holmes, his opera glasses trained on the crowd, was a study in focus, his sharp features softened only slightly by the glow of the gaslights. "There, Watson," he whispered, directing my gaze to a box opposite ours. "Lord Arthur with a companion, not his mother." I squinted, catching sight of the young man, his handsome face taut with unease, conversing with a veiled woman whose posture suggested secrecy. Her gloved hand rested briefly on his arm, a gesture too intimate for mere acquaintance. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice low to avoid drawing attention from our fellow patrons. "A question worth answering," Holmes replied, his glasses glinting as he tracked their movements. "Observe the way she leans toward him. Familiarity, perhaps, or coercion. Misdirection, Watson, is the art of this case." The curtain fell for intermission, and the audience spilled into the marble lobby, a swirl of chatter and clinking champagne glasses. Holmes led the way, his stride purposeful as we followed Lord Arthur and his companion. The lobby was a kaleidoscope of Victorian elegance, with polished floors reflecting the flicker of gas lamps and the rustle of taffeta gowns. Lord Arthur stood near a pillar, the veiled woman at his side, their heads bent close. Holmes, ever adept at blending into a crowd, positioned us near a group of gossiping dowagers where we could overhear snatches of their conversation. "The Crimson Debt, paid in full," the woman murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the crowd. Arthur's response was sharp, almost desperate. "It's done, I tell you, no more." Before Holmes could approach, the woman slipped away into the throng, her veil a dark wisp vanishing among the revelers. We confronted Lord Arthur, whose face paled at the sight of Holmes's piercing gaze. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he stammered, his hand clutching a program. "Merely enjoying the opera, nothing more." Holmes's smile was thin and unyielding. "Your companion, sir, seems less interested in Verdi than in debts of a crimson nature. Who is she?" Arthur's eyes darted, betraying panic, but he rallied with the bravado of youth. "A friend, nothing more. You pry too far, Mr. Holmes." Undeterred, Holmes pressed him. "Your father's death, Lord Arthur, was no accident. Deny it if you will, but your secrets unravel as we speak." Arthur's defiance crumbled, and he confessed to a gambling debt that had entangled him with unsavory figures, though he swore ignorance of his father's murder. As he spoke, Holmes's deft fingers retrieved a ticket stub that fell from Arthur's pocket. A pass to a dockside warehouse dated the night of the murder. "An alibi, perhaps," Holmes murmured, pocketing the stub, "or a clue to a deeper truth." We returned to our box as the opera resumed, but my mind was far from the stage. The veiled woman, the crimson debt, the warehouse ticket, each was a thread in the web Holmes was weaving. "Could Arthur be involved?" I ventured, my medical instincts recoiling at the thought of a son's betrayal. Holmes lowered his glasses, his voice low and thoughtful. "He is a pawn, Watson, caught in a game he barely understands. The woman is the key. Her veil hides more than her face, and this ticket," he held it to the light, "leads us to the docks where secrets are traded as freely as spices." The music swelled, a tragic aria echoing our pursuit, and I felt the weight of the mystery deepen like the fog that awaited us beyond the opera house's gilded walls. As we left the theater, the fog reclaimed London, its cold fingers curling around us. The clatter of cabs and the distant cry of a newsboy were muted, as if the city itself conspired to guard its secrets. Holmes, undaunted, hailed a hansom, his mind already racing toward the docks. "The crimson debt, Watson," he said as we rattled through the misty streets, "is no mere metaphor. It is a bond forged in blood, and we shall find its source." Chapter 6. The Forgotten Heirloom. The fog that enveloped London seemed to follow us to the Montague mansion, where the morning air hung heavy with the scent of damp stone and secrets. I, Dr. John Watson, accompanied Sherlock Holmes to the Belgravia residence at his insistence, our purpose to explore the attic, a repository of the family's past that might shed light on the serpent motif weaving through our case. The events at the Opera House, particularly Lord Arthur's furtive meeting with the veiled woman and the dockside warehouse ticket, had deepened the mystery of Sir Reginald Montague's death. Holmes, his mind a crucible of deduction, believed the attic held answers. "The past, Watson," he had said as we climbed the mansion's grand staircase, "is a shadow that lingers. Let us see what it conceals." The attic was a labyrinth of neglect, its air thick with the musty scent of mothballs and aged wood. Trunks and crates loomed like silent sentinels, their surfaces coated in dust that swirled as we moved. Lady Montague, pale but composed, had granted us access, her eyes betraying a flicker of unease as she handed us the key. "My husband rarely spoke of his early years," she had said, her voice soft as the rustle of her morning gown. "But he kept relics from India, trinkets he called them. I never thought them significant." Holmes, ever silent when absorbed, merely nodded, his gaze already fixed on the task ahead. We lit a candle, its flame casting wavering shadows on the rafters, and began our search. Holmes moved with methodical precision, his fingers probing the contents of trunks filled with faded silks, yellowed letters, and tarnished silver. I, less adept at such investigations, held the candle high, my medical instincts alert for any clue that might connect to the exotic toxin hinted at in the invisible ink message. The attic's silence was broken only by the creak of floorboards and the occasional skitter of a mouse, yet I felt a growing unease, as if the very walls watched us. Holmes paused at a small, ornate jewelry box, its lacquered surface etched with intricate designs of vines and snakes. "Curious," he murmured, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the lock. With a deft twist of a penknife, he opened it, revealing a velvet-lined interior empty save for a false bottom. My heart quickened as he pried it open, disclosing a single object: a ring, its band crafted in the shape of a coiled serpent, its eyes twin emeralds that caught the candlelight with an almost malevolent gleam. "The serpent again," I whispered, recalling the glove from Whitechapel and Lady Montague's brooch. Holmes held the ring aloft, his voice low and intense. "Not merely a trinket, Watson. This is a symbol of the Order of the Crimson Shadow, a secret society from Sir Reginald's youth in India. They were a cabal of merchants and soldiers bound by oaths of loyalty and vengeance for betrayal." He turned the ring, noting a faint inscription in a script I could not read. "Sanskrit," he said. "It translates to eternal debt." The crimson debt, perhaps, whispered in the tavern in the Opera House. I frowned, my practical mind grappling with the implications. A society? But how does this connect to a locked-room murder? Surely a ring cannot kill. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that familiar fire. "The ring is a key, Watson, to motive and method. Sir Reginald betrayed this order, perhaps by stealing an artifact or breaking an oath. This ring marks him as one of their own, and its presence here suggests he feared their retribution." As he spoke, a shadow moved at the attic's edge, the maid Eliza, who had been hovering near the stairs. Her eyes widened at the sight of the ring, and before I could call out, she fled, her footsteps echoing down the narrow staircase. Holmes sprang after her, but she vanished into the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, leaving us with only the echo of her panic. A red herring, perhaps, I suggested, catching my breath. She's just a frightened girl. No, Watson, Holmes countered, his voice sharp. She is a plant, placed in this household to watch or act. Her flight confirms her complicity, but she is not the mastermind. We must pursue her trail, though I suspect it leads to a dead end. He pocketed the ring, his mind already racing to the next thread in the web. As we descended from the attic, the fog outside seemed to seep into the mansion, its cold fingers curling through the windows. The ring, the serpent, the order of the crimson shadow, these were pieces of a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. I felt the weight of Sir Reginald's past pressing upon us, a legacy of betrayal that had reached across decades and continents to claim his life. Holmes, I ventured, if this order is behind the murder, how did they enter a locked room? He paused at the foot of the stairs, his silhouette stark against the flickering hall lamps. The method is in the details, Watson. The chimney, perhaps, or a hidden mechanism we've yet to uncover. The order's reach is long and their methods subtle. But every secret leaves a trace, and we shall find it. Chapter 7. Whispers from the Underworld. The fog of London, a relentless companion in our pursuit of Sir Reginald Montague's killer, clung to the East End like a shroud as night deepened. I, Dr. John Watson, followed Sherlock Holmes into the heart of the city's underbelly, where the air reeked of opium, stale ale, and desperation. The discovery of the serpent ring in the Montague attic, coupled with the maid Eliza's flight, had convinced Holmes that answers lay not in Belgravia's polished halls, but in the shadowed dens of vice. Disguised as a sailor, his face smudged with grime and his deerstalker replaced by a weathered cap, Holmes blended seamlessly into the crowd. I, less adept at such subterfuge, wore a plain jacket, my service revolver a comforting weight in my pocket. The serpent, Holmes had said as we left 221B, is no mere fence. He is a thread in the tapestry of the crimson shadow. Tonight, we pull it loose. The underground club, tucked beneath a crumbling warehouse near the Thames, was a hive of illicit activity. Lanterns hung low, their light barely piercing the haze of tobacco and opium smoke. The clatter of dice and the murmur of low voices filled the air, punctuated by the occasional shout of a card player cheated or flush with victory. Holmes moved with the ease of a man accustomed to such places, his eyes darting from face to face, seeking the one known only as the serpent. I stayed close, my medical instincts heightened by the sense of danger lurking in every shadowed corner. We found our mark in a secluded booth, a wiry man with a scar snaking across his cheek, his eyes cold and calculating beneath a slouched hat. The serpent-embroidered glove we had recovered in Whitechapel lay on the table before him, a silent challenge. Holmes slid into the booth opposite, his sailor's drawl flawless. "Word is you know of a debt," he said, his voice rough but steady. "A crimson one, owed by a banker now cold." The serpent's eyes narrowed, his fingers twitching toward a concealed blade. "You're no sailor," he hissed, but Holmes's gaze held him fast. "Speak, or the Yard will hear of your dealings before dawn." I tensed, ready to intervene, but Holmes's calm authority disarmed the man's defiance. With a reluctant nod, the serpent leaned forward, his voice a whisper lost in the din of the club. "Montague crossed the order years ago in India. Stole a relic, a jade viper sacred to the crimson shadow. They swore vengeance and they don't forget." I leaned closer, the opium haze stinging my eyes. "Vengeance how?" I asked, my voice low. The serpent's gaze flicked to me, then back to Holmes. "A dart, laced with a poison from the east. Curare, but refined. Stops the heart, leaves no trace, fired through a blowpipe hidden in the study's chimney. The order's way, silent, invisible." Holmes's expression remained impassive, but I saw the spark of triumph in his eyes. Who wielded the blowpipe? He pressed. The serpent hesitated, then pointed to a name. Elias Thorne, the rival importer. He's one of them, or was. Settled the debt for the order. But as he spoke, his eyes darted, betraying a lie. Holmes pounced, his voice cutting like a blade. Thorne's alibi holds. Name the true hand or your empire here crumbles. The serpent's bravado faltered, but before he could answer, a commotion erupted. A drunkard's brawl spilling into our corner. In the chaos, the serpent slipped away, vanishing into the crowd like smoke. Holmes cursed softly, but his mind was already racing. "A red herring, Watson," he said as we retreated to the fog-choked street. "Thorne is a distraction. The true killer is closer to the Montague household, marked by the serpent's coil." The night air was cold, the fog muffling the distant wail of a foghorn and the splash of the Thames against the docks. I clutched my coat tighter, the weight of the revelation heavy upon me. A blowpipe through the chimney, I mused. Ingenious, but how did they access it without detection? Holmes's silhouette loomed in the gaslight, his voice low and certain. "A trained accomplice, Watson, someone within the house or with intimate knowledge of it. The maid, Eliza, perhaps, or another we've yet to unmask. The serpent ring, the glove, the crimson wax, all point to a conspiracy rooted in betrayal." He paused, his gaze piercing the fog. "The Order of the Crimson Shadow is patient, but their patience is their weakness. They've left traces, and we shall follow them." As we hailed a cab back to Baker Street, the fog seemed to thicken, a silent ally to the secrets we pursued. The serpent's words echoed in my mind. The jade viper, the poison dart, the crimson debt. Each was a piece of the puzzle, yet the picture remained elusive. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind a beacon in the murk. "Tomorrow, Watson," he said as the cab rattled through the misty streets. "We return to the study. The chimney holds the final clue, and I intend to find it." Chapter 8. The False Trail. The fog that blanketed London seemed to thicken as night fell, its cold tendrils curling around the Thames docks like a living thing, muting the creak of ships and the distant wail of foghorns. I, Dr. John Watson, stood beside Sherlock Holmes on a desolate wharf. The warehouse ticket stub from Lord Arthur Montague's pocket our guide to this shadowed corner of the city. The revelations from the East End Club, the Order of the Crimson Shadow, the Poison Dart, the Jade Viper, had pointed us here to a dockside warehouse rumored to house smuggled goods tied to Sir Reginald Montague's past. Holmes, his eyes sharp beneath his deerstalker, scanned the crates stacked high around us, their surfaces damp with river mist. "The docks, Watson," he said, his voice low, "are London's veins pulsing with secrets. This ticket is no coincidence." The air was heavy with the briny scent of the Thames, mingled with the faint spice of exotic cargoes. Sandalwood, perhaps, or something sharper like the nard we had noted before. The warehouse loomed before us, its iron doors rusted but secure, its windows dark as the fog itself. Holmes, lantern in hand, examined a crate marked with a serpent insignia, its lines faint but unmistakable. "The order's reach extends here," he murmured, prying open the lid with a crowbar. Inside, among bolts of silk and jars of saffron, lay vials of a clear liquid, their labels in a script I could not read. "Curare, or a variant," Holmes deduced, holding one to the light. "Refined to kill without trace, as the serpent described." I gripped my revolver, my medical instincts alert for danger in this lonely place. "If this is the poison, Holmes, who brought it here?" "Thorne, the maid, Eliza." The warehouse ticket had suggested Lord Arthur's involvement, yet his gambling debts seemed a flimsy motive for murder. Holmes's gaze flicked to the shadows. "A question we shall soon answer, Watson, but first..." His words were cut short by a rustle in the darkness, followed by the scuff of boots on stone. Before I could react, 3 figures emerged from the fog. Rough men, their faces half masked by scarves, wielding clubs and knives. "Ambush!" I shouted, raising my revolver as Holmes dropped the lantern, its glass shattering in a burst of flame. The fight was swift and brutal. I fired a warning shot, the crack echoing over the river, but the thugs pressed forward, their clubs swinging. Holmes, with the agility of a fencer, parried a blow with his cane, disarming one assailant with a deft twist. I grappled with another, my military training serving me well as I landed a solid punch, sending him sprawling. The third lunged at Holmes, but a well-placed kick sent the man into a pile of crates which collapsed with a splintering crash. As the fog swallowed their retreating forms, Holmes retrieved a dropped knife, its handle etched with, you guessed it, a serpent. "Paid ruffians," Holmes said, catching his breath, his coat torn but his composure intact. "Sent to deter us, Watson, but not to kill. The order protects its secrets, but they grow careless." He examined the knife, then turned back to the crate, salvaging a vial before the flames from the broken lantern spread. "This confirms the poison's source, but the ticket stub was a lure, a false trail to implicate Lord Arthur." We retreated from the warehouse as the fire grew, the fog masking our escape. Back in a hansom cab, the clatter of hooves a stark contrast to the silence of the docks. I pondered the night's events. If Arthur isn't the killer, Holmes, why the ticket, and who sent those thugs? Holmes's eyes gleamed in the dim cab light. The ticket was planted, Watson, likely by someone within the household. Eliza, perhaps, though her role seems minor. The thugs were a warning from the order, but their failure betrays a desperate hand. The true killer is closer to the Montagues than we thought. Someone with access to the study, the poison, and the serpent symbol. He tapped the vial in his pocket. This toxin, delivered through the chimney as the serpent suggested, is the key. But we need proof of the hand that wielded it. As the cab rattled through the fog-bound streets, I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The serpent ring, the glove, the crimson wax, the poison vial, each was a thread in a tapestry of betrayal, woven across years and continents. My medical mind struggled to piece it together, but Holmes's certainty was a beacon. "Tomorrow, Watson," he said as we neared Baker Street. "We return to the maid. Her flight from the attic was no accident. She knows the killer's face, and we shall make her speak." The fog pressed against the cab's windows, a silent conspirator in the secrets we pursued. The docks had yielded a clue, but also a warning, and I could not shake the sense that the Order of the Crimson Shadow was watching, its coils tightening around us. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The storm that broke over London that night was a tempest to match the turmoil in my mind. I, Dr. John Watson, stood in our rooms at 221B Baker Street, the fire's warmth doing little to dispel the chill of the mystery that had consumed us. The events at the Thames docks, the ambush, the serpent-etched knife, the vial of refined curare, had brought us closer to unraveling the death of Sir Reginald Montague, yet the truth remained shrouded, like the city itself in the relentless fog. Sherlock Holmes, his shirt sleeves rolled up, stood before a corkboard he had transformed into a map of the case, its surface a web of photographs, notes, and crimson string. The serpent glove, the ring from the attic, the warehouse ticket stub, all were pinned in place, their connections traced with meticulous care. "The storm outside, Watson," he said, his voice steady despite the thunder's roar, "is but a mirror to the one we face. The pieces are aligning, and the killer's hand is nearly in our grasp." I paced, my medical mind wrestling with the fragments we had gathered. The Order of the Crimson Shadow, the poison dart delivered through the study's chimney, the red herrings of Lord Arthur and Elias Thorne. "Holmes," I ventured, pausing by the fire, The maid, Eliza, fled when she saw the serpent ring. She must know the killer's identity, but how do we find her in this storm? Holmes's eyes gleamed, reflecting a lightning flash. She is a pawn, Watson, but a vital one. Her flight confirms her role, likely a spy for the order placed in the Montague household to watch or act. We shall locate her, but first, let us reconstruct the crime. He gestured to the board where a sketch of the Montague study anchored the web. The locked room, the crimson wax, the nard-scented handkerchief, the poison vial, all point to a murder both precise and personal. The dart, fired through the chimney, required intimate knowledge of the house. Not Thorne, whose alibi holds, not Arthur, whose debts are a distraction, but someone within the household marked by the serpent's coil. He pinned a new note to the board. Crimson wax residue. This, Watson, is our linchpin. The smudge on the blotting paper, identical to the wax on Thorne's letters, was not from a seal but a ring, pressed in haste perhaps as the killer ensured Sir Reginald's silence. The butler, Grayson, has such a ring, noted in passing by Lady Montague. He served Sir Reginald for decades, including in India. I stopped pacing, my heart quickening. Grayson? The stoic butler? But his demeanor was impeccable, his loyalty unquestioned. My medical training urged caution, seeking motive over suspicion. Holmes's smile was thin, almost predatory. Loyalty can mask vengeance, Watson. In India, Grayson was more than a servant. He was a young officer, entangled with Sir Reginald in the order's dealings. The jade viper, stolen by Montague, was their sacred relic. Grayson's ring, like the one in the attic, marks him as a member of the Crimson Shadow. He waited, patient as a serpent, for the moment to strike. I stared at the board, the strings converging on Grayson's name. But the method, Holmes. How did he access the chimney without detection? And why now, after so many years? Holmes crossed to the window, rain streaming down the glass. The chimney has a flue accessible from the roof or an adjacent room. A trained hand could fire a dart with precision, the poison mimicking a heart attack. As for why now, perhaps a signal from the order or a personal grievance reignited. The crimson debt was not just gold, Watson, but honor betrayed. He turned, his silhouette stark against a lightning flash. Grayson's evasion during our interview, his knowledge of the study's layout. It all fits. A clap of thunder shook the room, and I felt the weight of the revelation. Then we confront him tomorrow, I said, my voice firm despite the storm's fury. But Eliza, her role remains unclear. Holmes nodded, pinning a photograph of the maid to the board. She is the final piece. Her flight suggests fear, not guilt. She may have witnessed Grayson's act or overheard his plans. We must find her before the order does. He paused, his gaze distant. The storm gathers, Watson, but it will break when we expose the truth. As the rain lashed the windows, I reflected on the chain of deduction. The serpent symbols tying Grayson to the order, the poison vial confirming the method, the wax residue betraying the killer's hand. My practical mind marveled at Holmes's ability to weave these threads into a coherent whole. Yet doubt lingered. Could a butler, so outwardly loyal, harbor such a deadly secret? The storm seemed to echo my unease, its tumult a harbinger of the confrontation to come. Holmes resumed his pacing, his voice cutting through the wind's howl. Tomorrow, Watson, we return to Belgravia. Grayson will face his reckoning, and Eliza, if we find her, will seal his fate. The crimson shadow has struck from the shadows, but light reveals all. As lightning illuminated his sharp features, I saw not just certainty, but a fierce resolve, a hunter closing on his prey. Chapter 10. The veil lifted. The storm that had raged over London reached its crescendo as Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John Watson, returned to the Montague mansion in Belgravia, our minds heavy with the weight of the truth we had pieced together. The fog, a constant shadow in our pursuit, had given way to torrential rain, its relentless drumming on the mansion's roof a fitting prelude to the reckoning ahead. The drawing room where we had summoned the household was a tableau of Victorian grandeur, its firelight dancing on crystal decanters and velvet upholstery. Yet the air was thick with tension, as if the very walls knew the secrets about to be unveiled. Lady Montague sat rigidly, her mourning gown stark against her pale face. Lord Arthur fidgeted, his eyes darting. The maid Eliza, recently apprehended by Holmes's street informants, stood trembling, and Grayson, the butler, maintained his stoic facade, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor. Holmes paced before the fire, his lean frame casting a long shadow, his voice cutting through the storm's roar. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone measured yet commanding, "we stand at the heart of a mystery that has claimed Sir Reginald Montague's life, a death deemed natural yet woven with malice. Tonight the veil is lifted and the truth shall stand revealed." I stood by the door, my notebook ready, my medical instincts alert for any sign of danger. Holmes held up the serpent ring from the attic, its emerald eyes glinting in the firelight. "This ring," he said, "is a symbol of the Order of the Crimson Shadow, a secret society from Sir Reginald's youth in India. He betrayed them, stealing a sacred relic, the Jade Viper, and incurring a debt they called crimson, to be paid in blood." Lady Montague gasped, her hand clutching her serpent brooch while Arthur's face paled. Eliza shrank back, but Grayson remained impassive, his eyes fixed on Holmes. The locked study, the absence of poison, the heart's sudden failure, all pointed to a natural death, Holmes continued. But the crimson wax on the blotting paper, the nard-scented handkerchief, the serpent glove dropped in Whitechapel, these were threads in a tapestry of vengeance. He turned to the board he had brought from 221B, now set up beside the fire, its strings connecting clues. The glove, the vial of curare, the warehouse ticket. The method was ingenious, a poison dart laced with refined curare, fired through the study's chimney flue. It required precision, knowledge of the house, and a hand steady enough to kill without trace. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "The murderer is among us," Arthur protested, his voice cracking. "You can't think it was me. My debts were foolish, but I loved my father." Holmes waved him silent. "Your debts were a distraction, Lord Arthur, a red herring planted to mislead. The ticket stub was placed in your pocket, likely by one who knew your habits." Eliza whimpered, and Holmes's eyes softened briefly. "You, Eliza, were a witness, not a killer. Your flight from the attic betrayed fear, not guilt. You saw something, didn't you?" She nodded, tears streaming. "I saw Mr. Grayson in the study late that night with a strange pipe. I thought it was for cleaning, but he was near the chimney." All eyes turned to Grayson, whose composure cracked, a bead of sweat glistening on his brow. Holmes produced the crimson wax-stained ring, holding it aloft. "This ring, Grayson, matches the smudge on the blotting paper. You pressed it there, sealing Sir Reginald's fate. You were no mere butler, but a member of the order bound by an oath broken by Montague in India. You waited, patient as a serpent, until the order called for vengeance." Grayson's facade shattered. "He betrayed us," he spat, his voice raw. "The Jade Viper was our honor, and he sold it for profit. I served him, yes, but only to bide my time. The dart was justice, delivered as he sat at his desk, oblivious." His confession poured forth, a torrent of long-buried rage, as Lady Montague wept and Arthur stared in shock. Holmes's voice was calm but unyielding. "You used a blowpipe, hidden in the chimney flue, accessible from the roof. The curare, smuggled from the docks, mimicked a heart attack. The wax residue was your error, Grayson. Your ring betrayed you." A lightning flash punctuated his words, illuminating the room's stunned faces. Grayson lunged for the door, but I blocked his path, my revolver drawn. "Enough," I said, my military resolve steady. He sagged, defeated, as Holmes signaled for the police, summoned earlier to wait outside. As Grayson was led away, Lady Montague rose, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I can rest now, knowing the truth." Holmes bowed slightly. "Justice, madam, is its own reward." As we left the mansion, the storm began to abate, the rain softening to a drizzle. Back at 221B, I reflected on the case, penning my notes by the fire. "Holmes," I said, "your deductions were remarkable, but what lesson lies in this tragedy?" He gazed into the flames, his voice soft. "Vengeance, Watson, is a poison as deadly as curare. It consumes the soul, leaving only ashes. Forgiveness, though harder, lights the way forward." His words lingered, a quiet wisdom amid the storm's fading echo.